joys and sorrows I do meet, yet through each day and night I ever seek for your will. May it be done. May I be one with your will. You've given life and beauty, truth and grace. You've given love and shown to us your face. By your will, may it be done. May we be one with your will. By your will, may it be done. May we be one with your will.
Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Homaham Jyotirgamaya Mrityormam Amritam Gamaya Avir Ahavir Maedhi Rudra Yate Dakshinam Mukha Te Namaham Pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality, and reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is understanding self-sacrifice. Begin with an image from the Rig Veda. In the beginning, there was the Purusha, the cosmic man. He existed alone. Nothing else existed in the universe. He was the creator of this world. And since he had no matter with which to create, he made the world out of himself. And his head became the Brahman class, with all of the scholars and the pundits and the wise men. And his arms became the Vaishya, the working class and the landowners. His heart became the Kshatriyas, the warriors and the rulers. And his legs and feet became the working class, the Shudras. Thus, in the beginning, this universe arose out of self-sacrifice. Now, students of the Bible, you read in the Old Testament many accounts of sacrificial rites. Where devotees and priests offer things for the glorification of God. or for the forgiveness of their sins. And you remember how there's a story, which is maybe the favorite story of the French existentialists, and that is about Abraham and his son Isaac. Abraham lived in Canaan, a land there today we call Israel, Palestine. And he was a great devotee of God. And one night he had a vision, a voice speaking to him, saying, Abraham, take your son and go to Mount Moriah, and on that mountain build an altar, and there sacrifice your son to me. Well, the very next day, Abraham called his servants. They loaded up the burros with some wood and some sticks. He called his son Isaac, and they set off on a journey. They went over hill and dale, and they came to the foothills of that mountain. He told his servants to wait there with the donkeys and the burros. And Isaac carried those sticks and those up the mountain. And even then, the boy asked, but father, says, where is the sacrifice? Where is the sacrificial lamb? No answer. They got up to the mountaintop. There they built the altar. And the father told his son, now climb up on this altar, just lay down here. And he bound him with ropes. And out of his cloak, he pulled a dagger. He raised that dagger on high. But at that moment, he heard the voice of an angel that said, Abraham, stay your hand. Today your son will go free. And look over there in the bramble bush. There you will see a ram, like a wild goat, that's tangled up in the briar bushes. Take that ram and offer it instead. And so he did. He loosed his son. He brought that ram up there on the altar and offered it as a sacrifice to God. And God was well pleased with his devotee. Later, he became the father of nations. Now, in the New Testament, we no longer read about animal sacrifice as it's prevalent in the Old Testament, due to the advent of Jesus Christ and the New Covenant. And we know how Jesus lived in his ministry, and how in the end, he sacrificed his own life for the salvation of mankind. That is, God gave his only begotten Son so that we may not perish and attain eternal life. That's the promise that those who believe in Jesus and the story of his crucifixion and his atonement for universal sins, then we shall not perish and we will have eternal life. And it's a story about self-sacrifice. And maybe some of you have read, it was an old book. It was a children's book that I remember about a giving tree. And there was once a tree, and around a boy he would come and play every day around that tree. Tree loved the boy. The boy loved that tree. And he would pick up leaves, make himself a crown, walk around. He'd swing from the branches, pick the apples and eat them. And he would rest in the cool shade. Well, things changed. And the boy grew up and he left, went off into the world. Time passed. But one day he returned. And the giving tree was so happy to see him. He said, "Oh, are you here to play in the swing from the branches?" And the boy said, "No, I have no time for play." He said, "I want money." And the tree thought, "Well, I have no money to give you, but wait a minute. You can pick these apples. Why don't you pick all the apples on the tree, take them and sell them in the market?" And so the boy did that, gathered them all up, hauled them away to the market, where he sold them, and he made some money. And things changed. Time passed. He grew older. And one day he returned to the tree, who was so happy to see him. He says, "What can I give you to make you happy?" And the boy said, "Well, I want a house." And the tree thought, "Well, I can't give you a house, but I do have branches. So why don't you just cut off these branches? Maybe you can use that wood to build a house." And so he did. He just sawed off all the branches, hauled them away. And, well, things changed. Time passed. He built that house. He lived. He grew older. And then again, later on, he returned to the tree. And the tree was so happy to see him. "I have nothing more to give you," she said. What can I do to make you happy?" And the boy said, "Well, I'd like to just have a boat, sail away from here." And the tree thought, "Well, I can't give you a boat, but, there's a big trunk here of this tree. Why don't you cut this down and take that? Maybe you could make a boat out of it." So which he did. He just cut it down to the bottom, hauled away that log of that tree, made himself a boat, and sailed around in that boat. But as he grew older and time passed, and now he was kind of an old man, one day he returned to the tree. And the tree was so happy to see him. "Yes, what can I give you? I have nothing left to give you." And the boy said, "Oh, that's all right. I don't really want anything now." He said, "I'd just like to have a nice place to rest." And the tree said, "Oh, to rest? Well, where could there be a better place to rest than the stump of an old tree?" And so that's the last photograph in that storybook, is that old man sitting on that stump, kind of pondering his life. So many interpretations to that story about how it illustrates the mother's unconditional love, the love of Mother Nature, who gives us so many wonderful things. And of course, the self-sacrificial love of God, who gave his only begotten Son. So we're talking about self-sacrifice and about that giving tree. May associate in our minds with that parable of Jesus, where he's in the synagogue, and he's approached by some priests, Jewish scholars, who asked him, "What must we do in order to have eternal life?" And Jesus said, "Well, what does the law say?" The book of the law. In other words, that's the Old Testament. What do they say? And the priest said, well, they says there to love your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And then Jesus thought, well, then listen to a parable. He told that parable about the man who on his way from Jerusalem to Jericho, he was a traveler, a merchant maybe, and he fell among thieves and robbers who stripped him of all of his possessions. And he took away took his money, his clothes, and they beat him, and they just left him there by the side of the road. And well, that poor man lay there, and time passed, and a Jewish priest came by that way, looked and saw the situation, crossed over to the other side of the road, continued on his way. Time passed. A Levite came by that way, saw the same thing, didn't want to get involved, crossed to the other side of the road. Then there came along that way a man from Samaria. And he, seeing the problem, he crossed over to help that man, bound his wounds, gave him his cloak and a blanket, lifted him up onto his burro, and then led him through the streets to the inn nearby. And there he led him in there, and he asked the innkeeper to please, give him food and shelter until he had returned from his journeys. He said, "When I return, then I'll pay you whatever is needful." So that's the famous story about the Good Samaritan. And, well, it has a whole range of interpretations. That is his goodness. Maybe we could say, as students of religion, yeah, we could interpret it as being an act of human goodwill, of humanitarian, humanistic altruism. We all feel that. Everyone feels like that. When you see someone in need, you will. There are brutish people maybe, but if you're really a mature human person, of course you'll feel that moved to go and give help. That's altruism. The spiritual religious interpretation may be a little more, a little different, and that is he was not motivated just by humanistic natural goodness, but rather he was motivated by a higher intuition of a universal, impersonal unity, a being that included all in love. And so he acted out, we may say, in our interpretation of the story, that yes, he acted out of, that's Christian charity. Christian charity is not an ordinary moral virtue. It's considered to be a heavenly gift of God. And so like that, he acted out of love of the neighbor, love your neighbor as yourself. Different interpretations. Of course, it has a Vedantic interpretation also. Maybe to understand that, I give another story that comes to us from the Mahabharata, which carries this whole idea of self-sacrifice to a new level. in the story of the Mahabharata, the great war, the Kurukshetra war. At the end of the war, the Pandava brothers, who were victorious, they celebrated their victory in the royal palace by conducting a great sacrifice, a yajna, which they offered many things to God, the gods in heaven. And they offered expensive flowers and jewelry and the whole range of fabulous foods and foodstuffs and fabrics and everything were offered. And then as prasad, they distributed all of those gifts to many thousands of people in the kingdom. And people seeing this, they say, we've never, ever seen a sacrifice like this. Is the greatest sacrifice that we've ever seen. And while they were talking like that, into the sacrificial hall there came a mongoose. And the mongoose, mongoose fights the cobras. And this mongoose came in, and one half of his body was brown, and the other half was pure gold. And so he started rolling on the ground. He was rolling round and round on the ground of that sacrificial hall, saying, "This is no sacrifice. This is no real sacrifice." And of course, all the guests, they heard that. And the ministers stopped and they thought, what are you saying? How could you say such a thing? Well, let me tell you my story, said the mongoose. He said there were 4 Brahmins, the father and the wife, his son and his wife. And they lived in a village, and they were very poor, as Brahmins were even in those ancient times, because they just lived by doing worship services and by little liturgical events there for which they'd be paid a pittance. And so they lived very austerely already. But it turns out that in that village there had been a famine for 2 years. People had nothing to eat. Everyone was going hungry. And the Brahmins themselves, they'd been starving for 2 or 3 days, but the father that day had returned home with a small little bag of barley flour, which he'd gotten from a devotee. And so the wife took that little flour, she cooked it up, and then they sat down, and they said their prayers. They were going to have their evening dinner. But no sooner had they said their prayers than they heard a knock at the door. Who was it? Oh, it was a guest. Now, in ancient India, of course, a guest, your dharma is to serve your guest as a visitation of God himself. In fact, the story tells us that this was Dharma, that is the God of righteousness and the law, the great moral law, which is appearing as the guest. But the Brahmins, they saw that, welcomed him in. Yes, sir, what can we do? Oh, I'm so hungry. I'm famished. I'm just dying. So, well, let me give you something, said the father. He gave him his portion of the food. And the guest just ate that up in a few moments. And he said, "Sir, you've killed me." He said, "I'm so hungry that I have to have more." And then the wife said, "Oh, well, sir, please take my portion." He gobbled that up. And then I'm still hungry. "Oh," said the son, "Sir, please take my portion." And so also the wife. And after he'd finished those 4 dishes, he thought, thank you. I'm very well satisfied now. And he took his leave. And that night, it so happened that those 4 Brahmins, they all died of starvation. And the mongoose was watching all this through the window. He's kind of watching this whole thing unfold. And he climbed through the window later on, and he rolled his body underneath the table. And there were a few granules of barley flour. And wherever that those little specks touched his fur, it turned it all golden. So he thought, yeah, that turned half my body golden. So since that time, I've been looking for another sacrifice that would turn the other half of my body golden. But I've never found such a one. This is from the Mahabharata. And so we can read this in Swami Vedarupananda, Karma Yoga, the context here of Karma Yoga. That is, these four Brahmins were great ideal karma yogis. That is, they did their duty for duty's sake. They did good for goodness sake. The principle of karma yoga is to work without attachment, to work with detachment and non-attachment. This is the title of Swami Vedarupananda's title of the chapter in the Karma Yoga. Non-attachment is complete self-abnegation. So that's the aphorism. And we can see that this is maybe, that's why I titled my talk here, Understanding Self-Sacrifice. And oh, wait a minute, this seems to be like a very high ideal. Why is it an ideal to sacrifice the lives of your wife and children? I mean, in any case, we can see that this story is something which goes far beyond conventional morality. And it also goes beyond what we could call post-conventional morality. That is personal goodness. The ideal here is, this is yoga. This is spirituality. And the idea is that it's not enough to be a good person. The ideal is to be a godly person. Not enough just to do your duty. You have to do your duty with detachment. That is your karma. Not enough to be a karmi, you have to be a karma yogi. And so the ideal has been raised very high. Almost, it seems to me like it seems like it's almost impossible. But Jesus says, remember Jesus says, "Be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." Now you may think, well, nobody's perfect. But then why did Jesus say, "Be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect"? And you remember those teachings of Jesus, or maybe we don't remember them. Love your neighbor. Love your enemies. If your enemy strikes you on the left cheek, well, turn to him the other cheek. If someone abuses you, just forgive them. How many times? The priests ask him, how many times should we say? In the Old Testament, it says 7 times we should forgive him. Jesus said, no, I say, forgive him 70 times 7. You think, well, wait a minute. It sounds extreme. And these are. Jesus says, "Go and sell all that you have." What do you do for attain eternal life? Well, okay. I want eternal life. What should I do? Go and sell all that you have, and give it to the poor, and take up your cross and follow me. Those are the words. That's Jesus' simple advice. So we can see here that we're not talking here about conventional morality. And we're talking here, and we're not talking about being just being a good person. That is, morality is like the foundation of the building. It comes first. But it's not the purpose. The purpose is to construct the building, which is the building of spiritual life. So the ideal here is to be established in ethical and moral living. For it's our foundation. And then going beyond morality to spirituality. Beyond personal goodness to impersonal being. That is about God realization, about self-realization, about perfect unselfishness. And, let's look a little bit about the philosophy behind this. That is the practice of yoga. And this high ideal that's set for us by the incarnations and by the spiritual teachers. Vedanta, you well know that the saints and sages discovered in ancient times that there is a non-dual, unlimited, unbounded, infinite reality. This is Brahman. This is the ultimate reality. One only without a second. And another name for that's the truth with a capital T. That's the self with a capital S. That is our center. That's the source of all things. Another name for Brahman, that is the absolute reality, is the Atman. The Atman is our true self. That is, the Atman is the non-dual, infinite, unbounded, pure consciousness. We call it Brahman, with our eyes open, looking outward, the unity, the foundation of all things. They call it the Atman, looking within us, same thing. There's an equation of identity between the Atman, that is your true self, and Brahman. Today, it's the human condition that we have fallen from our true nature. We've fallen from the awareness of our true nature, of our true self. And that we're living, as it were, under a cloud, that we see through a glass darkly, that we've lost our awareness of our own unbounded, infinite nature. And we found ourselves to be very limited and circumscribed and localized, our consciousness localized in one place. And this is the ego mind. This is our self-consciousness. It's our identification with the body and the mind. And our subject, well, what is the ego? The ego is just nothing but all of our false beliefs, our misunderstandings, our confusions, and our sense of limited self, motivated and driven by likes, dislikes, our separate person, our person. We're persons, driven by likes and dislikes, by desires and aversions and attachments, by love and hate. And we're bound by the attachment to the fruits of our karma, for which we die and we're reborn again and again in the great round of birth and death called samsara. So this is our condition. And our condition is such that that is our self-knowledge, that is our knowledge of our true nature, is hidden from us as if with a cloud. That cloud is the ego. That is the ego mind, the subject of the body and the mind, that identifies with the body and the mind. The person, the ordinary person, this is the human predicament. The person has made an idol of ourselves. That is of our personal self. We've made an idol of our personal self. That I'm using Christian terminology. God says, and it says in the Ten Commandments, "Thou, no God, shall have but me. Before no idol, bow thy knee." The first two commandments. So we've made idols of ourselves. Idol is just a false god. And God, of course, in the presence of God, we worship. So, in fact, we worship the false idol, which is ourself. That is, we consider ourselves to be like the center of the universe. And everything revolves around ourself. This is the ego. This is ego. This is the ego mind. This is our personal self. This is what's prevents us from realizing our true nature. And what spiritual teachings generally tell us that what we need in our lives is something like a Copernican revolution. We need to reconceptualize our place in the universe and realize that there is a higher power, as it were, or there's a greater infinite being. That is, there is an impersonal being which transcends, there's a being which transcends all, which has no ego. It's just pure consciousness. We could call it God. God is just infinite pure consciousness. God has no ego. He's a being he's pure. We could say unselfish. Swami Vivekananda was fond of that aphorism. Unselfishness is God. Now, usually we use the word unselfishness to do with dealing with children. Don't be selfish. That's not the sense that they're speaking here. They're using the sense unselfishness here, an extreme sense of selfless. Unselfish here means selfless. That means having no personal self. Having no identification with a localized, limited consciousness. There is such a being. That's called God. And the idea of the yogas is to reconfigure, reconceptualize our lives and reorient ourselves so that our lives are now cycling around that divine being, that's divinity. We may say it's our higher self, our true nature, or God, or infinite consciousness, but now we're circling and cycling around that being, and we're going to think of our self as the ego. The ego mind, it's not easy to get rid of the ego. Sri Ramakrishna says, whatever you do, the ego is like it's like the bay tree. It's like a bay tree. And we had so many of those in Olimo. You cut down one of those trees down to the very bottom. Hey, you come back the next day, there's a little sprout there. Come back again. So like that, the ego, we can't really get rid of the ego. Therefore, let the rascal remain. Sri Ramakrishna tells us, all right, let the rascal remain, either as the ego of the jnani or as the ego of the devotee. In other words, let it remain as the servant of God. Now, God is just this infinite, impersonal being, this unself-conscious, infinite being. In the presence of God, our natural impulse is to worship. And to worship is to serve. And so in Bhakti Yoga, for example, you see how the God is worshipped in the shrine, in the temple. Through service, things are offered, fruits and flowers, to the deity. But the idea in Karma Yoga is that we can expand this idea of worship to include all of our actions in life. That everything that we do, we can do as worship, that is in the spirit of offering the fruits of our action, either to the God within us, or to God in the form of the person that we're serving. And so this becomes a Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is all about, that is in this sense, it's about seeing God in everything, about serving God in everything. So, our subject here was understanding self-sacrifice. So we can see we have these stories of the Purusha and the Abraham and the giving tree and the Good Samaritan and the 4 Brahmins. And there's different ways in which we could maybe interpret them. We can interpret them as a humanistic virtue, goodwill, fellow feeling for others. We could interpret it as a religious, being religious, that is, seeing God, bringing Ishvara into the picture, seeing a divine influence that is a background, our philosophy of soul, God, and religion, and our conviction and our belief in our own soul and our own destiny, about seeing God in everything. And but in one of the last chapter of Karma Yoga, Swami Vedarupananda speaks of the greatest of the Karma Yogis, the example. And this is Lord Buddha. And Buddha is regarded by the Hindus as an incarnation of God. But as you know, Buddha, probably didn't believe in God. Certainly didn't talk anything about God. And didn't explain things in terms of worshiping God or serving God. In fact, he didn't even talk in terms of explain it in terms of some metaphysics or some Upanishadic wisdom. And yet, in his own life, he demonstrated this complete unselfishness. We want to call it complete self-sacrifice. I'm thinking of the Jataka tales. Story of 500 stories there, each one having a moral. A lot of them being about literally sacrificing his life. But many of them just moral experiences that built his moral character, that made him into the Buddha. The Buddha acted out of why did he sacrifice himself for others? Well, we're told it was out of compassion. It was out of love. That's a good explanation. By compassion, we just mean that it's not just sympathy or empathy, but that we're actually moved to take action to do something. So we call compassion. When you ask, why did he do what he did? The same question was asked of a saint who was seated on the banks of the river. And as he sat there, out of the corner of his eye, he saw that a scorpion was walking along a flat rock, and the scorpion walked over to the edge of that rock, and he fell into the water. And that saint immediately reached over, picked the scorpion up, put him on the rock. For which good work, the scorpion stung him. Oh, his whole arm now is going numb. He could hardly move his arm. No problem. He went back to begin his meditations, but then out of the corner of his eye, he saw that little scorpion was walking again. Walked over to the edge of the rock, falls into the water. And so he could barely move one arm, and then maybe with his other arm he reaches over, and he picks the scorpion up, puts it on the rock. He's stung again. His whole other arm is all numbed. Meanwhile, the Avadhuta, he's walking by, he's watching this, and he comes up to him, he says, "Revered sir, excuse me." He said, why did you keep doing that? You know that scorpion will sting you. And the saint said, he said, well, it's the nature of the scorpion to sting, and it's my nature to save him when he falls in the water. That's the explanation. It was my nature that I did this. Now, how can we understand that? What do we mean by my nature? The only way you can understand this is for the Vedanta philosophy. What is your nature? Your nature is that of the non-dual, infinite, unbounded, immortal, pure consciousness. When you act in your true nature, out of your true nature, a gesture of spirituality, it's not a personal act. It's not that the saint is being generous. It's not that he's a good man. Not that he loves animals or anything like that. You could say it's compassion, but compassion doesn't really get it, because we all kind of know what compassion means. We've been moved by compassion in the sense. That's not Buddha's compassion. The compassion of the Buddha mind is very Vedantic. That is, it presupposes that you are acting out of perfect freedom, that you're acting out of selflessness. It's not just that you're unselfish in the common meaning of that term, but that you are selfless, that you don't identify with a limited personal self, that you're identified with the universal, infinite being, which is the Atman, your true nature.
Lead us from illusion to truth and wisdom's sight. Lead us from the darkness that fills up the night. Lead us from death to endless life, to your heart of love, to your eternal
The speaker next Sunday is Swami Vedarupananda. Om Dyo Hoshanti Antariksha Hamshanti Prithivi Hishanti Apashanti O Shadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Saravam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Sa Me Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and in the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.